If you need to, like, you send it off or something.
Yeah, yeah.
The Tuesday, November 17th, 2020 meeting of the Eden Prairie City Council is now called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For those residents that will, post-COVID, continue to, or someday again, come back to our council meeting to address us, I just want to alert everyone that we do typically at our meetings have an open podium prior to our council meeting. Open podium is an opportunity for Eden Prairie residents to address the city council on issues related to Eden Prairie city government prior to each council meeting, typically occurring the first and third Tuesday of each month. You may speak to us from the time somewhere between 6:30 and 6:55 in this council chamber. If you wish to speak at open podium, please contact the city manager's office at 952-949-8412 by noon of the meeting date with your name, phone number, and subject matter. That's to help us be better prepared for you. If time permits, after scheduled speakers are finished, the mayor will open the floor to unscheduled speakers. Open podium is not recorded or televised. If you have questions about open podium, please do contact the city manager's office. Mr. Getchell, we do have several proclamations this evening and a Hennepin County Commissioner here with us. Do you want to introduce the first proclamation?
Yeah, absolutely, Mayor and council members. I'm pleased to welcome members of our Human Rights and Diversity Commission to come forward to talk a little bit about a project that was part of their work plan this past year that they spent quite a bit of time developing related to an Eden Prairie land acknowledgement statement. So I know we have 4 commissioners with us as well as our liaison to the commission, and 2 of our commissioners, Catherine Lucht and Leslie Philman, will provide some background. And I know, Mayor, you have a proclamation as well to read related to this initiative.
Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Hi, welcome for having me and Leslie here. As Rick said, my name is Catherine Lucht, and I'm one of the commissioners on the Human Rights and Diversity Commission. We worked together on this as a commission, and a little subgroup of us kind of put forth a lot of the effort into it, and then as a commission we all approved it and reviewed it. But we worked on a land acknowledgement statement, and people may not know what a land acknowledgement statement is, so I thought I'd give a little background on that. First off, a land acknowledgement statement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects the indigenous people and traditional stewards of the land we're on. Our process for this was as a commission, we created the subcommittee, and then we put forth effort in researching land acknowledgement statements as a whole. What are people around us doing as a Minnesota or as a nation in land acknowledgement statements, as well as spending time working on pronunciations of proper words and landmarks, and then drafting several statements based off of the research and history we found. We then hired Crystal Moore to review and edit our statements, and thus created the one that will be the official Eden Prairie land acknowledgement statement. So I'll pass off to Leslie.
So good evening, Leslie Philman, also on the HRDC. We'd like to thank Crystal Moose of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. She's also the manager of Native Pride Productions. She did a lot to assist us in the creation of the land acknowledgement statement. We'd also like to thank the People Fest Subcommittee and the Eden Prairie Community Foundation for their financial support. Next steps is that the HRDC is going to be working with city staff to hopefully get this publicly posted so that we can, so that it's a tool that can be interacted with the community. And also would like to just note that the land acknowledgement statement is going to be on the Eden Prairie website, so edenprairie.org/LAS. And also to recognize that November is Native American Heritage Month. And so I'll turn it over to Mayor Case to read the land acknowledgement statement.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Catherine. You know, I taught Eden Prairie history for 33 years in our school system with 5th and 6th grade. And we often think that history, you know, goes back to the first settlers in 1852 when people started to come here and build log cabins, but they came to land that people were already living on. And 1852 is what, 168 years of history, but there's 10,000 years prior to that. It goes back to the last glacier, and since then indigenous people have occupied the land exactly where we are. So I'm excited for what the work that Leslie and Kathy and your commission has done. I know that this is a complex and multi-layered issue that really without clear resolution between all sides, and yet however to recognize the feelings and struggles of others is a great first step toward healing. So here's the proclamation that was developed, and I'll read and will be posted, sounds like on our website and around the buildings here. Whereas it's important to acknowledge that we are gathered upon the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary homelands of the Dakota. And whereas through treaties, the U.S. government seized Ojibwe and Dakota land in Minnesota, specifically signing of treaties at Traverse des Sioux and Mendota in 1851, opened up land located to the west of Hahawakpa-Wakpathanka, which is the Mississippi River, I believe that's in Dakota, allowing pioneers to settle in what is now Eden Prairie. And whereas we acknowledge this land has a complex and layered history and pay respect to the elders who have stewarded the land throughout the generations and continue to do so. And whereas we offer the statement as a step toward healing and make a commitment to learn the history of the land Eden Prairie is built on, to recognize, support, collaborate with, and advocate for indigenous peoples, and to consider the convergence of legacies that bring us to where we are today. And now therefore be it resolved that the City of Eden Prairie hereby proclaims these statements as a step towards greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights, and to promote an equitable relationship and reconciliation. Ronald A. Case, Mayor, City of Eden Prairie. Council members, anything you want to add to that before we move on? You don't have to, just a thought. I'm excited that we're, and pleased that we're acknowledging, again, because I love history. And I want to say, too, that maybe people realize this, maybe not, but as you walk the trails over down by Richard T. Anderson, you'll find there are burial mounds that are acknowledged and designated with kiosks. We have, almost every time we have development projects along the bluff over the last 20 years I've been on the council, we've had to take great pains to be careful with burial mounds and often have found them. So the presence of our Native Indigenous people living here for thousands of years is recognized and known, and I hope valued and honored as well. Before we move on, thank you, Mr. Aho. Councilmember Aho is a great help to me these days. I appreciate that so much. I do want to acknowledge that this is one of the first meetings we're really trying to be hybrid in terms of offering opportunities for our council members to be in person or virtual. Depending, all of us, I think, across the United States of America, but in Minnesota and also Eden Prairie, are dealing with how do we go forward in the weeks and months ahead with COVID, whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas or other holiday celebrations. So I just want to acknowledge that Councilmember Kathy Nelson is participating in this meeting, or actually tonight she will be afterwards and right before, but she will be virtual. She won't be actually in the formal meeting, but we have a closed session afterwards dealing with our city manager's contract, and she'll be part of that. So I just wanted to acknowledge her presence. Thank you, Councilmember Aho. All right. Through the long tenure of Hennepin County Commissioner Jan Callison, we've appreciated, I believe it's every year you come in, at least that's my memory. You've been so good with that. But she visits all the 16 cities in her District 6. And she's been so faithful to come to Eden Prairie regularly, and we just appreciate the representation that she's given us. Many of you know that she did not choose to run again for re-election, so this is, I guess, your final month, isn't it? And we really want to pay homage to you and honor really your service and commitment to the District 6, but also to Eden Prairie, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand I can take my mask off?
You may.
Thank you. I have not mastered speaking clearly, not fogging my glasses, and keeping the mask in the right position.
Absolutely,
So
I understand.
I appreciate the leniency, and I appreciate the chance to address you and the council members and the staff. I have one more month left after this. I'm actually done January 4, but certainly I'm on the home stretch. So I brought along a PowerPoint. This has been a significant year for Hennepin County, and I thought I would make sure I go the right direction. Pardon? Okay, now we'll see.
Katie.
There we go.
Oh, got
So a
it.
couple of topics, COVID-19, quite contemporary, the unrest in Minneapolis, and then the 2021 budget. And I'm always happy to take questions as I go along, so don't hesitate to interrupt me. I thought you'd be interested in just some numbers for Hennepin County in terms of what we are seeing. So these are as of yesterday. They're quite current. We've had 51,000, almost 52,000 total cases in Hennepin County. About 4,000 cases of people have been hospitalized and 1,000 deaths. If you do the math, we have about 20% of the state's population in Hennepin County. But these numbers would say we've had about 22% of the total cases, about 29% of the hospitalizations, and about 35% of the deaths. And when we first started tracking these numbers, it was about a third of the hospitalizations, a third of the cases, and half the deaths. So the numbers have changed over the course of time as, of course, the virus has changed and has moved into different parts of the state. If you follow the virus, you can probably anticipate why we see a higher percentage of cases in Hennepin County. And this gives you information on a racial basis about who contracts COVID-19 in Hennepin County. So, well, actually, this slide is the first one. So the first two bars are for the white population. The blue bar is the percent of cases. It tells you that about half the cases have occurred in the white population, but the white population makes up 72% of the county's population. So a disparity there. For the black population, about 20% of the cases have occurred in that population, but the black population makes up about 13% of the county's population. So as you've heard about people of color being more affected by COVID-19, you can see it in Hennepin County. And you can track through the other categories, people who checked other. Asian is closer to the white population, multiple races more like the black population, and then American Indian. This next slide will tell you what happens to people by race who contract COVID in Hennepin County. So the first slide is for the white population. By contrast, the next slide is for the black population. The blue portion of the box is the percent of cases where people don't go to the hospital, so they recover at home. The red part is people who go to the hospital, and the black part is fatalities. So if you contrast the white with the black, you see it's fairly similar in terms of people recovering at home. So in the white population, 91%, for the black population, 88%. But a larger percent of people in the black population are hospitalized. A smaller percent pass away. You know, an interesting contrast in terms of what you might have been hearing in the news. But go down to the American Indian population. You can see there that 75% only of those folks recover at home. 20% end up being hospitalized. And the fatality rate looks roughly like the white population. The other area of disparities that you hear about with COVID-19 is for seniors. And this will give you a sense of what we're seeing in long-term care facilities. So the first set of boxes all relate to folks in long-term care settings. We've had 2,665 cases in Hennepin County. The hospitalization rate is 26%. The fatality rate is almost 30%, 1 in 3. And the median age is 81. For everybody else, the population not in long-term care setting, you can see the hospitalization rate is 6.4%, case fatality rate is 0.5%, and the median age is 34. I thought you might be interested in the data for Eden Prairie. This is actually for all the cities in my district, all 16. Eden Prairie has had 1,403 confirmed cases, 12 deaths. Interestingly enough, Edina is right below. It's a slightly smaller city than Eden Prairie, but it's had more cases, 1,444, and more deaths, 54. And I think that relates to the fact that Edina has a more senior population than Eden Prairie. Minnetonka is the other one you might want to contrast with. Again, 1,191 cases and 40 deaths. So let me give you a sense for what we've been doing in response to COVID. On March 17, we sent over 6,500 employees home. That's not our entire workforce. It's closer to 9,000 people. So a number of people could not go home. And you might expect, particularly those in public safety, so those in the jails, in the workhouse, in the jail, the workhouse, juvenile detention facility, people in public health, all those folks remain in their jobs. So we had to figure out ways to keep them safe and keep the public safe as well. So folks in the jail, folks in the workhouse, make sure they didn't contract COVID. We had to maintain essential services as we sent people home. So our social services are highly regulated by the state of Minnesota. They tell us what we can do and how we can do it. And in many cases, they tell us we have to meet with people in person. And of course, once we sent people home, that was not possible. So we had to get waivers from the state in order to provide services. And a simple example is Minnesota requires, if you want a marriage license, you have to come in person to the service center. We couldn't do that for a period of time. So we had to get the state to give us permission to issue marriage licenses, even if we didn't see the people face to face. And then, of course, we've tried to reopen our service centers and our libraries. So again, making sure we have the equipment and the protocols to keep people safe as they access our services. In March, we moved 544 high-risk homeless individuals to hotels. We selected people who were at risk because of their age or because of their underlying conditions. So by moving them to hotels, we not only protected them, but we decompressed the shelters. So people who were in the shelters were not as exposed, as likely to contract COVID. It has been a very successful strategy in terms of making sure we can fight the disease. It is very expensive. So prior to this date, we were spending about $200,000 a month on this population. This has been more in the range of $2.5 million a month to have hotel rooms for that population. We received a direct allocation from the federal government of CARES Act funding, $220 million, and we have distributed that widely across the county. So for food, for youth activities, for nonprofits, for a number of different enterprises, for public health. But I want to talk just for a brief minute about small businesses, housing, and HCMC. The federal monies did not relate or did not reach small businesses, so businesses 20 folks or less. And so we have allocated about $40 million towards small businesses in Hennepin County, and as of a month or so ago, we had distributed over $700,000 to businesses at Eden Prairie. Today we took action to add another $8 million to that, particularly for restaurants and for bars, recognizing that they will be affected by this next order. So it'll be close to $50 million that we're going to try and allocate to small businesses, hoping that they will still be around when this pandemic ends. Housing is not for homeless. Housing is simply for people who rent or mortgage assistance so that they will not lose their housing and won't join the ranks of the homeless. And HCMC, we've allocated about $44 million towards them. Housing, the amount is about $16 million. We extended the due date for the Maine property tax payments and now the October property tax payments, which actually will probably due November 15. So this is sort of old news. It wasn't for everyone, but it really touched a lot of folks in Hennepin County who might have had problems paying those property taxes. And then we are a public health entity, so we've been purchasing masks and distributing them. We've been leading testing events, and we have performed more than 8,600 COVID tests at those events. And we conducted a primary and general election as well successfully. So let me turn to a minute to the other story of 2020, and that's the unrest in Minneapolis following the tragic death of George Floyd. I brought along a few pictures of county properties that were affected. So this is the East Lake Library in May. The picture on the left is property across the street from the library. The picture on the right is the interior of the library. At this point in May, I think we had 8 libraries open. This was one of them that was open. The next picture is the Minneapolis, was the South Human Service Center in Minneapolis on Lake Street. We built this building probably about 4 years ago. You can see all the windows were smashed. There was water damage from intrusion and the sprinkler system. The next picture is a picture of a pharmacy that was looted and then damage to another business that was there. And this is in North Minneapolis, which also sustained damage. This is a facility we were renting, and we will not be returning to this facility. But you can see the same sort of damage, water damage, and then looting and just general vandalization. We took steps to protect our buildings. The top picture is the jail with a fence around it. That fence is still up. We boarded up windows at the Minneapolis Central Library, also at the Government Center. We have continued to have to protect buildings periodically. Minneapolis is still a place where there's a lot of unrest, and so we continue to make sure that these buildings stay safe. So in response to this, we have been repairing damaged county property. It's about a $5 million price tag. We do have insurance, so it's about $1 million plus for county property taxpayers. We have allocated $1 million in overtime to the Sheriff's Office. We have abated taxes for damaged properties. We have contributed to a fund to support business recovery in Minneapolis. And we have been focused for many years on reducing racial disparities and declared that racism was a public health crisis as well, to sort of deepen and sharpen that focus. And then let me talk just for a minute about the budget preview for 2021. We approved a max levy of 0% increase. I got my property tax statement, or forecasted statement. It showed a decrease in my county property taxes. That is probably true for a number of Eden Prairie residents as well, and businesses. But the 2021 budget is more uncertain than perhaps past budgets have been, so certainly we're not sure how long the COVID emergency will last. We don't know what federal or state assistance we might require. We don't know how we will deal with the homeless population, which is really too expensive to sustain. And we are expecting that whenever there is a vaccination or a vaccine that's available, we will have to share in the cost of distribution. And that's that $5 to $10 million that we're using as a placeholder right now. And finally, let me just touch on the election, the general election, not the primary. So we had about an 85% voter turnout in Hennepin County. That's an extraordinary number. 2 out of every 3 ballots was cast early as an absentee ballot. We had the results by about 9 or 10 o'clock on that election night, and that's because the state permitted us to start counting early. So we were able to open those ballots 2 weeks early and then run them through the machines at the appropriate time. So that concludes my presentation. I am grateful, as always, for the time on your agenda, and I am really grateful to have had the opportunity to represent Eden Prairie for the past 12 years and be part of the Eden Prairie community. So thank you so much for all the support over all these years.
Commissioner, one quick question. I too am pleased with your levy, and then I also opened my envelope, and the tax impact on my home, I believe the county was down a little bit. What's your short answer for being able to do that when the first 3-4 slides were all the extra expenses that you're incurring?
Well, a lot of work behind the scenes in terms of consolidating spaces. So one good thing coming out of the pandemic is we have more people working at home. We need fewer spaces that we rent, so some savings there. Looking to ways with personnel where we can save money, so asking employees to take special leave without pay. We just approved today, I guess, $7 million because of our self-insurance fund, that we're not going to be collecting insurance premiums from the county. So there's a savings. So it's a number of different ways of doing things. We have not reduced staff, but we looked in the libraries, for example, at reducing staff. So the staff has been pretty creative at finding different ways and different buckets of money. And I think there is some hope that we're going to see some CARES Act funding as well.
Sure. Council members, any questions or comments? Councilmember Narayanan.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm just curious, what is your plan to distribute the fund to the small businesses? Are you going to do that directly, or are you going to go through the cities to distribute that fund?
We have done it more directly, but we have used nonprofits. So we have had businesses apply to the nonprofits and have them do the screening, and then the county has paid the resources directly to the small businesses. And we've focused, again, certainly recognize the need of small businesses across the county, but focused also on businesses owned by people of color and by women, recognizing they have more restricted access to funds than some other businesses do.
So in Eden Prairie, which are the nonprofit that allowed to distribute that fund?
There are a couple nonprofits that we work with throughout the county where businesses applied and they did the screening of the applications.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
Just thank you for your service. Appreciate all that you've done in your role.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Absolutely. Commissioner Callison, thank you so much. You've been a great public servant, wonderful for Eden Prairie. So I'm going to begin an applause, but I hope everyone out in the county is joining me. But thank you so much for. You're welcome. All right, all the talk of the small business loans, et cetera, leads right into our next agenda item. Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, Mayor. For several years, the council has proclaimed Small Business Saturday, which I believe this year is November 28th. And we don't have anyone here to give a presentation, but I know, Mayor, you've typically read the proclamation for the record, and it's something that we've endorsed for a number of years, along with many mayors and elected officials throughout the country.
Definitely, not to be a spoiler alert, but pay attention to the last sentence, because it really is going to encourage Eden Prairie people and all Minnesota residents to frequent small businesses, right? And spend your dollars there. We need them to survive post-COVID, and they need our help now. Whereas the City of Eden Prairie celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, there are currently 31.7 million small businesses in the United States, and they represent 99.9% of all businesses with paid employees in the United States. They're responsible for 65.1% of net new jobs created from 2000 to 2019. Whereas small businesses employ 47.1% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, 62% of U.S. small businesses reported that they need to see consumer spending return to pre-COVID levels by the end of 2020 just in order to stay in business. That was about 2/3. They need to have the pre-COVID amount of revenue coming in. 65% of U.S. small business owners said it would be most helpful to their business to have their regulars return and start making purchases again. And 3/4 of U.S. consumers are currently looking for ways to shop small and support their community. Whereas 96% of consumers who shopped on Small Business Saturday agree that shopping at small, independently owned businesses supports their commitment to making purchases that have a positive social, economic, and environmental impact. And 97% of consumers who shopped on Small Business Saturday agree that small businesses are essential to their community. And whereas 95% of, a lot of percentages, there will be a test after this, 95% of consumers who shopped on Small Business Saturday reported the day makes them want to shop or eat at small, independently owned businesses all year long, not just during the holiday season. And whereas the City of Eden Prairie supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now therefore, the Eden Prairie City Council does hereby proclaim November 28th, 2020 as Small Business Saturday, and we urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and also throughout the year. Ronald A. Case, Mayor. All right, we all know what we have to do. Okay, we are down to approval of the agenda and other items of business. Council, is there anything you wish to add to the agenda or question at this time? Okay, hearing none, can I please have a motion to approve the agenda?
I would move to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We have the minutes from both the October 20th council workshop and the October 20th regular council meeting. Any questions about any of them? We can make a motion for the two of them at one time if you
Move
don't.
to approve the following city council minutes. Council workshop held Tuesday, October 20th, 2020. City council meeting held Tuesday, October 20, 2020.
Second.
Okay, hearing no questions about them, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving down to the consent calendar, item J is being funded by United Health Group, which happens to be my employer. So I'm going to recuse myself. So if somebody could make the motion to approve A through I and K, and then I'll vote on that, and then we'll make a separate motion on J.
And I would like to pull
sorry.
item G just for some discussion on that.
You want to talk right now, and then rather than
Yeah,
make
no.
three motions? Go ahead. Why don't
Sure.
you bring it up now?
Yeah, so that's fine. So item G, for everyone listening, is the award a contract to DeYoung Consulting Services for race and equity consultation. So we're proposing that we're going to spend roughly $50,000 on this consulting. And I guess I'm not really in favor of doing that. I think that we're spending $50,000, and really the premise is that that the city of Eden Prairie is systemically racist, and I really don't agree with that. I don't feel that the city of Eden Prairie is systemically racist, and so I think for us to spend $50,000 to learn how we cannot be systemically racist, I don't think that's a great investment, and so I guess that's my point.
Okay, why don't we do this then? Why don't we pull that one too? So
Yep.
if we could have a motion A to F, H and I and K, and then we'll vote independently on G and J. So is there a motion for the A to I? No. A to F, H, I, and K.
Yes, I would make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on any of those items? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. All right, let's vote on J, because I don't think there's discussion on that. There's just simply I have to recuse myself. So is there a motion to award the contract for traffic control to that company, which happens to be then funded by United Health Group, which is a contract, by the way, when Shady Oak was built, and the development agreement, and it was all part of, I think, an original developer's agreement. If not, it's been added or tweaked. But okay, in other words, it won't be a surprise to United Health Group is my point. Okay, is there a motion to approve J?
I would move to approve the award of contract to Traffic Control Corporation for purchase of signal cabinet for West 62nd Street project.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I recuse myself. All right, G. Let me just add, and so I appreciate you sharing your comments. So as a council, we did have a majority that did proceed to direct and task the HRDC to investigate systemic racism. And at the time, to be very fair, you brought up that you weren't seeing exactly in our police department and others the systemic racism that the rest of us were talking about. So if you want to discuss more, we absolutely can. Otherwise, we can vote on that. You're free, certainly to vote no on that. Can I ask any other council members if you equally have concerns along with Councilmember Aho?
I got a concern on it myself about the amount, $50,000. And I'm looking at that, and I'm just not sure, if that can't be directed elsewhere.
Okay.
I mean, rather than paying a consultant, to that point, rather than paying a consultant $50,000 to tell us if we're racist or not racist or how we cannot be racist, if we're going to spend that money, I'd rather see it go directly towards something that's actionable and going to be helpful.
So I appreciate that. My hope, having been part of the school district and gone through various trainings throughout my 33 years, was, and they did hire some firms. I'm sure they spent more than $50,000, and they did not come in and just say we were racist. They came in and really helped us work through the sense that we might be blinded to white privilege and to systemic racism. So I definitely appreciate that there's multiple views on that. Feeling that then I'm thinking would you plan tonight on voting against this then? Is that what I'm hearing you?
What I'd actually like to do is I'd really like to discuss this further as far as whether we do it tonight or we do it at another meeting. Because I think I want to do it justice. Okay, I want to make sure that, that we can look at all sides of it. And I just got to be able to feel good that when I'm looking at a figure of $50,000, that we can't do something collectively that's more monitorable, and to the point.
Sure.
Because, go ahead.
Nope, you finish, I'm sorry.
Mayor, can I just add?
Well,
Okay, sorry. Okay.
I'm going to speak as soon as he finishes it, but then I'll let you in just a second.
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
If I could, I think what we should do, I appreciate the need for more discussion, and actually then I would like to have that as well. I want to make sure that we don't hamstring the HRDC after we task them with going out to really look at systemic racism, be able to come back to us with some substantive ideas and ways that this community can address, which I think all communities across the United States, I would take issue with you on this. I think white America across the United States of America has some hidden biases and some systemic racism that's been built into our society. So that's my belief. But I think every community across the country, ideally right now, this is what's the good word I want, an inflection point in our nation's history, a time that we should, I guess, it sounds like it's positive. It's been a negative environment this year with the George Floyd murder, but this to me is a time where we as a society could look internally and work to improve ourselves. So I want to not hamstring them on this. I want this eventually to pass. So can we pull this, Mr. Getchell? And then
Yes, Mayor, you can.
back to the next meeting, and could I suggest that staff come back with a presentation to exactly what this 50,000 would go for, what this company stands for, what the objectives are, what the outcome is hoped for, and then we can have a better understanding for all 5 council members, and we'll make sure to have all 5 council members here in some way, virtual or by the way, for the public, we're going to work very carefully to do a hybrid meeting in December, allowing any council members to stay home that need to or wish to, and anybody that is comfortable coming in can. But can we do that, Mr. Getchell?
We can. I was going to, provide a little bit of quick background now, but we can certainly come back with the full presentation.
Why don't we just come back?
Sure.
Do you think?
Yep, we'll do that.
If that's okay. Councilmember Narayan.
Mayor, that's exactly I was thinking, that to get a little more information will be probably satisfy everybody's need.
Good.
So,
Okay.
good
Excellent.
suggestion, thank you.
All right, so where are we at? So we're not going to vote on that. We voted on everything else. So we're done with the consent calendar. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Maggie, from a legal standpoint, that's fine. Just simply, do we need any kind of motion to pull it, or we just simply don't vote on it? What do we do?
I think as long as you don't vote on it, it's fine.
Okay. All right. Moving on then, we have public hearings. We have one, Trail Point Ridge PUD amendment. Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. We do have one public hearing tonight. You may recall the Trail Point Ridge project, which is part of a larger Smith Village on Glory Lane near the Eden Prairie Road 212 intersection, is a project of 58 workforce housing units that you approved in the last year. And they're coming back with planning commission and staff support for a very minor amendment to their PUD based on one of their parking waivers. So they received a parking waiver that requires 116 total parking stalls, and 49 of those are underground parking and 67 are surface parking. And based on some discovery through construction, they need to move one of those covered parking stalls and be allowed to have the one covered parking stall as part of their surface parking. And I know we have the applicant here to provide a quick overview for you and answer any questions that you may have. And staff can do that as well through the public hearing process. But the recommendation is, I just want to mention quickly too, that if we have unanimous support for the waiver, we could have first and second reading, and that's how it's placed on the agenda for first and second reading following the public hearing to allow the project to continue to move forward.
And the statute does allow unanimous for who is in attendance.
Correct.
Okay. Please come forward and name and address. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Cecile Bedore. I'm the Executive Vice President of Real Estate for Common Bond Communities, and I live at 4904 Oakland Avenue in Minneapolis. So I won't repeat what you just heard, but just a reminder, first of all, I wanted to thank you again for your support for this project. Just to remind you of who Common Bond is, we were established in 1971 as an affordable housing provider. We've been around for 50 years. We develop and own and operate affordable housing in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. We're based in St. Paul, and we provide, again, our own property management, and we provide some level of services at all of our buildings, rather. So again, you know the location. I hope you've had a chance to go by this, and I won't review because the city manager just did so. But here's a couple of photos in case you haven't seen it. This is one of the exterior, and this is another photo of the exterior. So, as we said, we had some issues with coordination, frankly, between our architect and our engineer. They didn't collaborate sufficiently in terms of the size of the makeup air unit, which is what you see here. It was not intended that that was going to take up a whole parking stall, but in fact it did. We can move it to the outside for a cost of $35,000, or we could have done one extra parking spot outside. We talked to city staff to alert them that we decided to move ahead with that because that cost was $5,000. It would have been $10,000 had we waited for tonight because we would have had to have the contractors come back. So we figured the worst case that could happen is that we'd have an extra parking spot. So we apologize for this error, but we respectfully request this change. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Council?
Seems like a pretty minor change, and I mean, you guys are doing great work, and the building is coming along very beautifully, and we're thrilled that you're here. So hopefully we're all in support of it, but we'll find out.
Okay.
Definitely, thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would wish to address this issue, address the city council on this issue? Okay, council, nope, seeing none, go ahead and I guess close it and also read the rest of the motion if that's your pleasure.
I would move to close the public hearing and approve the first and second reading of the ordinance for planned unit development district amendment with waivers on 2.03 acres and approve the first amendment to the development agreement for Trail Point Ridge.
I second that.
You seconded? Okay, any further discussion? So again, we need a 4-0 vote to approve both of these tonight. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. First and second reading. Welcome again. Thank you so much for being here. And you've got an extra stall outside and one less inside. All right. Payment of claims. Is there a motion to approve?
I move the approval of a payment of claim.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll ask now. I should have probably before, but it's just fine. Are there any items you had questions about? Okay, all those in favor say, we got a roll call. Yes, go ahead, proceed.
Councilmember Aho,
Aye.
Councilmember Freiberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Narayan,
Aye.
Mayor Case.
Aye. Okay, let's see. Maggie, do you want to explain maybe to the public what's going to happen now? And pull your mic down just so we can hear you a little bit better there. But is that fine? Or we're going to go into closed session. I just wanted to have the public understand what that's about and why we do that and the legality.
Sure, absolutely. The Minnesota open meeting law allows the council to go into closed session when it's doing a performance evaluation of an employee subject to its authority. That's section 13D.05 of the open meeting law. So what the council will do now is move to go into closed session. We'll then do the closed session, and then the meeting can be adjourned after that. And then at the next meeting, the mayor will read a summary of the performance evaluation, and there will be no vote of any sort taken during the closed session on salary or anything like that. Anything like that will be done in open session.
Okay, and just for people's understanding, the council basically has one employee. We hire the city manager, and then the city manager hires the 300 FTE and 600 or 700, whatever, with part-time, but hires the people to go out and do the work that our policy and directions give to him. So this is, we are giving him his performance annual review tonight, and then discussion and setting his salary, but again, not voting, and we'll come back into open session in December and give a report on that. So I will adjourn from downstairs, correct?
Correct.
And so right now I don't do anything except get up. All right. So the rest of you have a great evening. Thank you for coming. We'll be in closed session downstairs. And council, if we can have 5 minutes maybe and head on down there.
You might not need to.
Again, thank you for coming in person this evening.
I just did.
If you're
I told
watching at
Peter
home,
that
thank you so much.
Yeah.
We
If I think
appreciate
about it, I think
your
everybody
involvement in
makes sense.
democracy and paying attention to what we do.
Yep.
Have a good evening.
You're right. I suppose if it was going to be, let's move to closed session. I'm not going to do it.
That's interesting. We did adjourn the
Yeah,
meeting.
we're going to write down
We
the
did not
times.
adjourn the meeting.
Yeah.
Continue,
Yeah.
then you bring
Like
down
when we go in,
then
when we
agenda
start,
items.
when we finish, yeah. Thank you, Maggie. Because I'll forget. You're good. You can go home. Yeah. You don't have to come back. You don't have to wait.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, we're actually leaving this room.
We'll close the meeting from down there.
Exactly.